So I moved to Northwest Baltimore in 1986, particularly in the Park Heights community, in the Southern Park Heights community. And the difference, I think the staunch differences I've seen between then and now is in the 80s when I grew up, there were a lot of good things happening in Park Heights, but there were a lot of bad things happening. We were number one in a lot of negative categories and been that way for decades. And we were able to go outside and play outside. And even in the 80s, we were playing outside in the back alley with me, my friends, playing football, doing things, going to the recreation centers, all of things. And it was just a little more positive environment. It was a very kind of cliquish community, you know, whether you were what they called down bottom or if you were up top, which was, you know, above Cold Spring. But it was more of a, there was more camaraderie. Everybody was proud to be from Park Heights. You were proud to live in Park Heights then. You were proud to go anywhere in the city and say, you know what, I'm from Park Heights. And it was a big thing. It was a thing. Being from Park Heights was a thing. You know, it was a culture. You know, we were some of the best guys in the city. We had some of the best women in the city. We had the best food in the city. And we had some of the best neighborhoods in the city. So people were excited and proud to be from Park Heights. So I moved to Northwest Baltimore, particularly in Park Heights, in 1986. And I left and went away, went in the military. Was in the military for 11 years. Came back home, back and forth. Saw some of the guys from the old neighborhood, and a lot of things had not changed. And I realized that I'd made some of the right decisions, but the community itself was stagnant. You know, it didn't change, it didn't move, and it needed that. So when I came back home in 2008, I immediately got involved in community. Got involved in, you know, became the president of my community association, and then was elected as the president of what was then the Ricestown Park Heights Southern team. And you see a lot of that work by that organization. Well, it's now the new Park Heights Community Development Corporation. And so as the Ricestown Park Heights Southern team, we advocated for a lot of things. We actually did the Park Heights Master Plan. We helped get the bond funding for what's now the Zeta Center. You know, we secured bond financing for the Jack Paulson recreation facility, which is now where at Ricestown and Woodland, where the Park Heights Saints play, youth football team. So, so those things we saw begin to change. There were new buildings going up. There was new housing being done. There were a lot of things that were proposed. And then there were a lot of things that were told that were going to happen that didn't happen. And I remember in 2005, there was an organization in Park Heights that used to be the Northwest Baltimore Corporation. And what a lot of people don't know is that Park Heights has never had a money issue. Park Heights has always had, and I say Park Heights, but I mean Northwest Baltimore, has never had a money issue. It's always been an accountability issue when it came to how things were funded and financed. So, and I say this because a lot of people don't know that since 1972, there was a pot of money that always went to Park Heights called the Racetrack Impact Fund. And that money was to a tune of about $500,000 a year. So since 1972, you can kind of see how much money that was over time. And the community never saw benefit from it, or at least a lot of sectors of the community. But that's also, I think, what began to divide the community. Because then it became Park Heights, and particularly some parts of Northwest Baltimore, became communities of the haves and the have-nots. And so those that lived south of Cold Spring or Northern Parkway began to see the deterioration of the fabric of the community. And where those resources were supposed to go, they never went. And so we had counted about $70 million that had not gone in places where it was supposed to go. And to this day, can still count those dollars. And it's unfortunate. But I think fast forwarding from 2005, when the Park Heights Master Plan was done in 2006, then that led to the 2006 creation or the disbanding of Northwest Baltimore Corporation, and in the same legislation created the Pimlico Community Development Authority. That's how the PCDA was created. And so you look at the history of that, and that now became the engine as to how funds would be spent particularly in Park Heights, but even in the 1 mile radius in Northwest Baltimore. And that's a huge piece of the puzzle as to what happens now going forward in the redevelopment of the Park Heights community. It's a huge huge part of that. In 2010, when the community started to get the first slot revenues from VOT funds. This was done from legislation that was done in 2007, which was Senate Bill 3 that passed the slots legislation. Now everybody voted for it because nobody thought that Northwest Baltimore would ever get slots. So everybody voted for it. But behold, in 2010, we began to get those revenues. 11 years later, now there's been a tune of $38 million. So whether people agree with the legislation, the thing is, that's $38 million in resources that should be allocated and should be used in our community more effectively, if not even for leverage, to raise even more capital, to do more work. That's one man's opinion. So when I look back on the people that influenced me in Park Heights, I look at people like Derek Compton, who's still around. You know, I look at people like the late Oscar Cobbs, the late Miss Viola Bell, you know, and they were giants in the community. Dr. Eleanor Bryant, who's the pastor at the Lord's Church. So we just had so many leaders in Park Heights, so many people that were influential. Miss Lillian Sidnor, you know, who's in her 90s now, you know, and so those were people that you could go to and they would give you the most honest answer ever. I look at people like Miss Patricia Rideout, you know, who's she's probably done everything in Park Heights. And so these were people that I learned and that taught me that the one thing that we have to do is protect the interests of the residents of Park Heights. And protecting those interests sometimes doesn't make you friends, you know. But they were the leaders. They were, you know, and there's more, and I know I'm forgetting some, and I'd hate to leave some out, but the leadership at the time was very strong, very passionate, and they passed that passion on, to people such as myself and others. A lot of things haven't changed. Let me just be candid. There are a lot of things that haven't changed. I can tell you that there's been a huge impact and an awakening of what the issues are and how they can be fixed. I think that we as an organization have had some of that impact and done some of that work and some of that lifting in making sure that the community was, one, informed on the things that it had not been informed of in the past, so we didn't make those same mistakes and repeat the things by not knowing. Facilities such as the Zeta Center. And you look at how happy those seniors are when you walk into that building. And you go up to Woodland Avenue, about a block or so up from there, to Ricestown and Woodland, you see those kids out there on the field, the Park Heights Saints, and you see those kids out there enjoying, and you see that every Saturday, and you see hundreds and hundreds of kids and parents and all that. Those are the things that don't get covered in the media. And those are the things that need to be covered, that those are the stories that people don't tell, particularly about Northwest Baltimore, and more specifically about Park Heights. Where we started in 1999 to where we are in 2021 is light years. There are several programs that are now in place. And I think that part of that is that we haven't wavered. And I think we've kind of stayed the course without any public funding, without generating these massive revenues or taxes on taxpayers and things like that. What we've done is simply just rolled up our sleeves and said, look, this is what we need to get it done, and we're going to find a way to make it happen. So we've had some great political support over the years, but I think that the community is now in a different place, on a different track. But we still have to make sure we maintain the protection of the people of the community, because the minute that we don't, other things can happen, other bad things can happen. So what can bring the seniors and young people together? I think that I'll go to this. At a facility called the Zeta Center for Healthy and Active Aging, and then where you have, within 2 blocks, hundreds of children and dozens of seniors. So I think those are some things that we can do. I think that there's activities that we can do. You know, we don't have to wait until once a year when we have National Night Out or when we have communities. I think there's a lot of things that seniors actually want to be a part of. And I think that sometimes we forget that they're part of the community, of the fabric and fiber of the community. So I think if we go to where seniors are, we have quite a few senior buildings particularly in Park Heights and all over Northwest Baltimore. And all we have to do is take some initiative and say, you know what, the people that can mold our young people are the people that are already here. We don't need to bring people in to do it. We already have thousands of seniors in Northwest Baltimore, thousands, and we have thousands of children. About 12,000 young people in Northwest Baltimore. And so all we have to do is not even be real creative, just do things the way that they were done in the past. You know, the young people were always around the seniors. What we have to do is create a path to where the seniors aren't afraid of the young people. So going forward in Northwest Baltimore, the hope is that we turn the community around and we go back to doing some things, but we're being very different going forward, that we do things that hopefully there's a sense of collective ideas that are being put forth, and young people are involved in that process, that they're learning from the seniors, that we're doing development, that we're doing affordable housing, and that the people that's doing the work in our neighborhoods and our communities are the people that live there, that the young people that we see standing outside, that they're doing this very work that people are saying that needs to be done, that we're encouraging everybody to be a part of the process and not be a part of the problem and not complain about it. Be a part of it. Get involved with it. Get involved in your community association. I hope that people will see things differently and see Northwest Baltimore. We have some very, very good neighborhoods throughout Northwest Baltimore, you know, from Howard Park to Windsor Hills to Ashburton, to Roland Park, and to specifically to my home, which I have a deep affinity for in Park Heights. So that's the thing going forward, is that we have to make sure that we're on track to make Northwest Baltimore the greatest community, the greatest part of the city, the greatest sector of the city, which I believe it is, and I believe it has the greatest potential. So with that, thank you. Growing up in Park Heights, there was a huge sense of pride in the community. You were happy to be from Park Heights, and I think as time went on, back when you got into the 90s, 2000s, you started seeing some of the deterioration of the fiber of the neighborhood. We started losing people. We started losing key people. We started losing community leaders. People then began to move further out of the city, further out of the neighborhood, you know, into Baltimore County, surrounding counties, surrounding jurisdictions, and Park Heights began to be a very violent place, particularly in the neighborhood that I grew up in, you know, which was south of Cold Spring Lane. It began to be a violent place. As I said, we were #1 in a lot of negative categories: HIV, AIDS, drugs, infant mortality, all of those things. We were #1 in a lot of negative categories, and there had to come about some change. And so the conversations had always been had over the last 20, 30 years.